While I was working on an oil rig abroad, my wife texted, "I'm leaving you for a 27-year-old and taking all our money to Palm Springs." I replied calmly, "Good luck." By the time she realized what I'd done, it was far too late. Life has a weird way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. My name's Mark Thompson, and until 6 months ago, I was just another guy working the oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. Tough job, sure, but the pay made up for it. 3 months of back-breaking work, followed by 1 month at home in our comfortable Houston suburb. That rhythm defined my life for nearly 9 years. Sharon and I had been married for 12 years, high school sweethearts who'd tied the knot right after college. She was this vibrant, auburn-haired woman with a laugh that could fill a room. When we first got married, we hardly had 2 nickels to rub together. Our first apartment had this leaky faucet that drove us crazy, but man, we were happy. Together, we built what I thought was a solid life. A 4-bedroom house with a wraparound porch, 2 cars in the garage, and enough savings to feel secure. At least, that's what I believed. The oil rig schedule wasn't easy on our marriage, never is, for any of us out there. 3 months away, 1 month home. During those 3 months, I'd work 12-hour shifts in blistering heat or freezing rain, sleeping in cramped quarters with 20 other guys. Not exactly glamorous. But Sharon seemed to understand. She'd always say, "This sacrifice is building our future." Turns out she had different ideas about what that future looked like. Looking back, I probably should have noticed the warning signs sooner. The receipts for restaurants I'd never been to, the new clothes that appeared in her closet with price tags that made me wince, the way her phone would mysteriously flip face down whenever I entered the room. There were these new phrases she started using, these new interests that seemed to appear overnight. But when you're exhausted from working offshore for weeks, you don't always see what's right in front of your face. I've always been careful with money, comes from growing up with parents who lived paycheck to paycheck. So while the oil money was good, I wasn't frivolous. Set up retirement accounts, investment portfolios, emergency funds, all that boring financial stuff most people in their 30s put off thinking about. Sharon would tease me about being a grandpa with money, but I figured one day she'd thank me. Never imagined those precautions would end up saving me from financial ruin. But then again, I never imagined a lot of things that happen. It was my 6th week on the rig when my phone buzzed during lunch break. The Gulf was unusually calm that day, flat as glass stretching out to the horizon. I remember because I'd just commented to Jake how rare it was to see the water so still, like it was holding its breath. When I glanced down at my phone, I realized why. Sometimes the universe gives you these little warnings before it pulls the rug out. The text from Sharon read, "I'm done pretending. I'm leaving you for Eric. He's 27 and actually lives life instead of working it away. Already transferred our money to my personal account. Heading to Palm Springs tomorrow. Don't try to stop me." Just like that, 12 years reduced to a few cold sentences. My hands started shaking so bad I had to put the phone down on the metal table. Jake noticed immediately. We'd been friends since our first day on the rigs 8 years ago. "Mark, you look like you've seen a ghost, buddy." Jake's voice seemed to come from far away. I handed him my phone without saying anything. His face darkened as he read, "Holy shit. Who the hell is Eric?" I shrugged, though deep down I had my suspicions. There had been a personal trainer at her gym she mentioned a bit too often. A few of the guys nearby stopped their conversations, sensing something was wrong. The mess hall suddenly felt too small, too hot. "What are you going to do?" Jake asked, handing back my phone. Around us, the constant industrial hum of the rig continued. Metal on metal, engines pumping, the occasional shout from the deck crew. Normal life continuing while mine was imploding. I took a deep breath and felt something shift inside me. Not quite anger, not quite relief, more like clarity. I typed back a simple response, "Good luck." That's it. 2 words. Jake peered over my shoulder and raised his eyebrows. "That's all you're gonna say?" I nodded. "Yep." I could have explained right then. Told him everything I'd discovered and prepared for over the last few months, but something held me back. Maybe I needed to see how it would all play out first. Sharon's response came almost immediately. That's it? Good luck? Aren't you going to fight for me? For us? It was almost funny how indignant she sounded, like I was the one betraying her. I turned off my phone and slipped it into my pocket. Jake was still staring at me, concerned. You know something I don't you? He asked. I just smiled slightly and picked up my fork to finish my lunch. Let's just say, Sharon might not enjoy Palm Springs as much as she thinks. I guess now's the time to rewind a bit and explain what Sharon didn't know. About 4 months before that text, I found some strange charges on our credit card statement. Weekend stays at a hotel in our own city, expensive dinners for 2, at times when I was definitely hundreds of miles offshore. At first, I tried to convince myself there was some explanation. Maybe she was treating a friend. Maybe the statement was wrong. That kind of self-deception doesn't last long. One night, during my month at home, Sharon fell asleep with her phone unlocked. I'm not proud of looking, but there they were, hundreds of messages between her and Eric Jim. Jim selfies, heart emojis, explicit texts about what they'd do when the husband was back at sea. My stomach felt like it was full of ice water. 12 years of trust shattered in seconds. I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I started planning. First call I made was to Melissa Chen, the financial advisor who'd helped us set up our investment portfolio years ago. I need to protect some assets, I told her, keeping my voice steady even though my world was crumbling. Discreetly. Melissa didn't ask many questions, probably seen this scenario play out dozens of times. She helped me establish separate accounts and move most of our investments, ones I'd primarily funded from my rig work, into my name only. What you're doing is legal, my lawyer Linda Martinez assured me during our confidential consultation. As long as you're not hiding marital assets, but rather securing what's rightfully yours. Texas isn't a true community property state in practice, especially with proper documentation. And I had documentation. Years of pay stubs showing my income was what built our nest egg, while Sharon's part-time retail job barely covered her personal expenses. Document everything, Linda warned, and don't tell anyone what you're doing. The trickiest part was our joint checking account. The one Sharon apparently thought contained all our money. In reality, it held about 15% of our actual worth. Every month, I'd been gradually moving funds to my protected accounts, leaving just enough for regular bills and a bit of cushion. Not enough to drain it suspiciously, but enough that over time, the bulk of our savings was secure. Most of our real wealth was in retirement accounts, investments, and a separate property I'd inherited from my grandfather, all now legally protected. I even sold some valuable collectible coins I'd had since childhood and kept the cash in a safety deposit box, something Sharon knew nothing about. Was this calculated? Absolutely. Devious? Maybe. But when you discover the person who vowed to love you forever is planning to clean you out while you're working yourself to exhaustion to provide for them, well, self-preservation kicks in. Standing on that oil rig that day, reading her text about taking all our money, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. The first panicked call came about 6 hours after her initial text. I was just finishing my shift, muscles aching from a long day of work. 5 missed calls and a dozen increasingly frantic texts. I sat on my bunk, Jake giving me space as I finally called her back. "What did you do?" she screamed, not even saying hello. Her voice had that shrill quality I'd only heard once before, when she thought someone had broken into our garage, but it turned out to be a raccoon. "What do you mean?" I asked calmly. Too calmly, probably, which just made her more furious. "The accounts!" "There's only $4,300, 0 cents in our checking account. Where's the rest?" I could hear her breathing heavily, could picture her pacing our kitchen with that vein in her forehead pulsing the way it did when she was truly upset. "Well," I replied, "I've been moving money to secure investments for our future, just like I always told you I was doing." In the background, I could hear a male voice, presumably Eric, asking what was going on. "He's hidden the money somewhere," Sharon told him, her voice slightly muffled like she'd turned away from the phone. Then clearer to me, "Mark, this isn't funny. I need that money for my new start." The slip was so obvious it was almost comical. Our money when she wanted it, her money when she was leaving. I could hear them arguing now, their voices rising and falling as Sharon apparently walked between rooms. You said he had at least $200,000, 0 cents in cash. Eric's voice came through clearer now. You said we'd be set. Something crashed in the background. Sharon had always had a habit of knocking things over when upset. Mark, she came back, voice suddenly honeyed. There's been a misunderstanding. I was upset and said things I didn't mean. The transformation was stunning. From I'm leaving you to misunderstanding in less than a day. Is that right? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. So you're not leaving me for Eric? A pause. It's complicated. I just need you to tell me where our money is. We can talk about everything else when you get home. I almost laughed. Sharon, there's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. The money you're looking for is in investments, retirement accounts, and trusts, all perfectly legal, all documented by our financial advisor. Another crash in the background, followed by what sounded like a door slamming. He's leaving, Sharon hissed, no longer pretending to be sweet. Eric's walking out because you've ruined everything. Her breathing was erratic now, like she was on the verge of tears. Look, I made a mistake, okay? I was lonely. You're never home. We can fix this. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical labor. No, Sharon, we can't. Call a lawyer. I already have. When my 3-month shift finally ended, I flew back to Houston with a knot in my stomach. Our house looked exactly the same from the outside. Trimmed lawn, blue shutters we'd painted together 4 summers ago, the ceramic frog by the front step that Sharon had insisted was charming, but everything else had changed. Sharon's car was in the driveway, which surprised me. I half expected her to be gone, despite our tense phone conversations over the past few weeks. She opened the door before I could even use my key. The woman who greeted me looked like a deflated version of my wife. Hair pulled back messily, eyes puffy and rimmed with red, wearing an old college sweatshirt I hadn't seen in years. "You really going through with this?" she said. Not a question. I nodded and stepped past her into what had once been our shared home. The living room was littered with takeout containers and empty coffee mugs. Sharon had never been the neatest person, but this was different. This was neglect. "Where's Eric?" I asked, setting down my duffel bag. Sharon made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Gone. Turns out his interest in me was directly proportional to how much money he thought I had. She followed me as I walked through the house, taking inventory of what remained. Most of my things seemed untouched. "Did you really know? Before I texted you?" she asked, her voice small. I stopped at the mantel, looking at our wedding photo, still prominently displayed. Yeah, I did. Tom Barnes, my supervisor, had been surprisingly understanding when I called to request an extended stint on the rig. Family situation was all I had to say. The brotherhood of the oil workers includes an unspoken understanding of marital problems. Too many long separations, too much strain. "You can stay on another 6 weeks if you need to," he'd offered. "Give things time to settle." I'd thanked him, but decided it was time to face things head on. My sister, Rebecca, drove down from Dallas the next day. She'd always been skeptical of Sharon, in that protective big sister way. "You're doing the right thing," she assured me as we boxed up the belongings I wanted to keep. "She'd betrayed you, planned to rob you blind. You don't owe her anything." But 12 years is a long time. There were moments watching Sharon move silently around the house we'd built together, catching glimpses of the woman I'd fallen in love with, when I questioned everything. Then I'd remember the text messages, the calculated plan to take everything while I was helpless at sea. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward. Sharon didn't contest anything once her lawyer explained how thoroughly I documented our finances. "You were always the planner," she said during our final meeting, signing the papers without looking at them. "I should have known you'd be 3 steps ahead." There was almost admiration in her voice. As I stood to leave, she caught my arm. "For what it's worth, I did love you. For most of those years, anyway." I nodded. "I know. That's what makes it worse." 6 months after that text message that changed everything, I stood in my new apartment in Austin, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked. The place was half the size of our Houston house, but felt twice as spacious without the weight of lies hanging in the air. Through the window, I could see the city skyline, a fresh view for this chapter of my life. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier, with terms that left me financially secure and Sharon with enough to restart, though nowhere near what she and Eric had plotted to take. I'd taken a different position with the same company, onshore supervisor, with regular hours and weekends free. The job paid less than the rig work, but after a decade of chasing money to build a future that crumbled, my priorities had shifted. Jake had been the first to visit my new place, bringing beer and zero judgment. "You know, Thompson," he'd said, surveying my half-assembled furniture, "for a guy whose wife tried to clean him out, you seem happier than I've seen you in years." The final text exchange with Sharon came on a Tuesday evening as I was cooking dinner for myself. "Found an apartment in San Antonio," her message read, "starting fresh. Thank you for not taking everything, even though you could have." I stared at the phone, surprised by her gratitude when I'd expected bitterness. I typed back, "We both deserve better than what we became. Good luck, and this time I actually mean it." She sent back a simple thumbs-up emoji. Somehow, that understated response felt like the most honest communication we'd had in years. Sometimes I still catch myself planning for two, buying too many groceries, or turning to share a thought with someone who isn't there. 12 years of marriage leaves grooves in your habits that don't smooth out overnight. But there's something freeing about rebuilding on your own terms. I've started rock climbing on weekends, something Sharon always refused to try. Reconnected with college friends I'd lost touch with, even started dating again, cautiously. The money I'd protected has become less important than I thought it would be. Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful I had the foresight to secure my future, but the real value of this whole mess was the clarity it brought. There's a difference between building a life and just accumulating things to fill one. When I look back at that moment on the rig, reading her text and responding with those two simple words, "Good luck," I realize it wasn't just about the money she wouldn't find. It was about finally seeing my worth beyond what I could provide. My mother called it divine timing. That Sharon revealed her true self while I was physically unable to react impulsively. Those 3 months at sea gave me distance to process everything clearly. If there's a lesson in all this, maybe it's that sometimes the worst moments arrive precisely when we're best equipped to handle them. Or maybe it's simpler. Trust your gut, keep receipts, and remember that starting over isn't the same as going backward.